Meet Lisa and Marco. Lisa walks into a Toyota dealership and drives out with a brand new Camry. Marco opens Uber on his phone and requests a ride to work. They live in the same apartment complex. They both earn $65,000 a year. And they both think the other one is throwing money away. Same city. Same commute. 14 miles each way. Same grocery store. Same gym. Same social life on weekends. The only difference is that Lisa has a car in her name. Marco doesn't own one at all. He hasn't for 3 years. His friends think he's lost his mind. Her friends think she's being responsible. But here's the thing. Neither of them has ever actually sat down and run the real numbers. Every morning, Lisa walks to her parking spot, starts her Camry, and drives to work. Every morning, Marco pulls out his phone, taps a button, and a car shows up. Lisa pays a fixed amount every month, whether she drives 10 miles or 10,000. Marco only pays when he moves. One of them is bleeding money they can't even see on a bank statement. The other one is saving more than they realize. Over the next 12 months, we're going to track every single dollar both of them spend on transportation. Every payment, every hidden fee, every cost that never shows up on a receipt. And when you see the final number, the answer to should I own a car or just Uber everywhere is going to come down to one variable, one number. And that number is probably lower than you think. We're going to break down Lisa's real cost of owning that car. Not the monthly payment, everything, the insurance, the fuel, the maintenance, the parking, and the one expense that quietly eats more money than all of them combined, the one she never sees a bill for, depreciation. Then we're going to do the exact same thing for Marco. Every ride, every surge price, every time he rents a car for a weekend trip. And at the end, we'll find the precise mileage where one option stops making sense and the other takes over. Let's start with Lisa. On paper, Lisa's car payment looks completely manageable. That's because the payment is designed to hide the real cost. Lisa's Camry costs $30,000. That's the LE trim, nothing fancy. She financed it over 5 years at 6.5%. Her monthly payment comes out to $587. That's the number she sees every month. That's the number she budgets for. And that number is basically a lie, because it's not even half of what the car actually costs her. First, insurance. Lisa pays $200 a month for full coverage because the lender requires it while she's still making payments. That's $2,400 a year, just for the privilege of driving the car she's already paying for. And honestly, $200 is on the low end in 2026. Depending on the state, that number could be much worse. Then, fuel. Lisa drives about 12,000 miles a year. Now here's something a lot of people don't realize. The current Camry is exclusively a hybrid, every single trim. So Lisa's getting about 47 miles per gallon combined. At $3.50 a gallon, that works out to about $890 a year, roughly $74 a month. The hybrid thing actually saves her quite a bit here. Third, maintenance. Oil changes, tires, brakes, filters, inspections. That noise that shows up at 70,000 miles and turns into a $500 visit to the shop. On average, Lisa spends about $100 a month on maintenance. Some months it's zero. Some months it makes her stomach drop. It averages out. Then there's parking and registration. Lisa pays $120 a month for her apartment parking spot. Registration and fees add another $30, $150, gone every month, whether she drives or not. But here's the cost that changes everything. The one Lisa never gets a bill for, never thinks about, and only feels the day she tries to sell that car. Depreciation. Lisa's $30,000 Camry will lose about 37% of its value over 5 years. Camrys actually hold their value better than most cars, especially the hybrid models. But even so, that's roughly $11,100 gone. Not from an accident, not from damage, just from time passing. About $185 a month evaporating quietly. No receipt, no notification, no line on her bank statement, just gone. Add it all up. Lisa's real monthly cost: $587 for the payment, $200 for insurance, $74 for fuel, $100 for maintenance, $150 for parking and registration, and $185 for depreciation. That's $1,296 every month. $15,552 a year. She thinks her car costs $587 a month. It costs almost $1,296. That gap is where the real story lives. Now let's look at Marco's side, and at first glance, you'd think he has this whole thing figured out. Marco doesn't own a car. No insurance, no gas, no maintenance, no registration, no parking spot bleeding $120 a month. His transportation cost is exactly what he uses, nothing more. Here's where the numbers get interesting though, and honestly a little painful for Marco. His daily commute is 14 miles each way. An UberX for that distance in a mid-sized American city in 2026 costs about $30 one way. That's not surge pricing. That's the normal fare. Uber charges roughly $1 per mile plus about 32 cents per minute, plus the base fare, plus the booking fee. For a ride that takes around 25 minutes, $30 is pretty standard. Some cities it's $25. In Manhattan or San Francisco, it could be $45. We'll use 30. That means Marco's daily commute costs $60 round trip. He works 5 days a week. That's $1,320 a month just getting to and from the office. Already more than Lisa's total. And Marco doesn't only commute. He goes to the grocery store 2 rides a week, shorter trips, around $10 each. Weekends, he goes out. A couple of longer rides on Friday and Saturday nights, maybe $25 each. He visits his parents once a month, $40 ride each way, and every once in a while, surge pricing kicks in. A $30 ride becomes $50, total it up. Commute, errands, social life, the occasional surge. Marco spends about $1,720 a month on Uber. $20,640 a year. I'll say that again, $20,640. Lisa's number was $15,552. So at 12,000 miles per year, which is roughly the national average per driver, owning a car is already $5,000 cheaper than Uber. That's not a rounding error. That's a vacation. Every year. At this point, you might be thinking the video is over. Car wins. But the scoreboard is about to change. Because 12,000 miles is one number, and Marco's life doesn't have to stay at 12,000 miles. The car wins at 12,000 miles. But here's where the math quietly changes direction. What if Marco doesn't commute? What if he works from home 3 days a week? What if he moved closer to his office? What if he only uses Uber for errands and weekends? Here's what happens when Marco's mileage drops. His costs drop too. And they drop fast. Because every mile Marco doesn't travel is $1 something he doesn't spend. Meanwhile, Lisa's costs barely move at all. Whether she drives 5,000 miles or 12,000, the payment stays the same. The insurance stays the same. The depreciation stays the same. Parking, registration, all fixed. At 12,000 miles, Lisa wins by $5,000. But at 8,000 miles, the math shifts. Marco's Uber spend drops to about $12,800. Lisa's total only drops to about $14,600 because her fuel and maintenance shrink, but everything else stays locked in. And somewhere around 8,500 miles per year, the two lines cross. Below that point, Uber is genuinely cheaper. Above it, Every mile tips the scale further toward owning a car. That crossover point, and I spent longer than I probably should have trying to get this number right, is roughly 8,500 miles per year. Not 13,000, not 15, 8,500. And that number is a lot more relevant than it sounds. Because if you work from home, if you live in a walkable city, if you're retired, if you barely drive on weekdays, 8,500 miles might be exactly where you live. The Uber receipt shows you the fare. Here's the stuff that never shows up on any receipt. Surge pricing erosion. Marco budgets $30 for his morning commute. But a few mornings a month, it rains, or there's an event downtown, or drivers are scarce. That $30 ride jumps to $45 or $50. Over a full year, surge pricing adds 8 to 12% to his total spend. That's an extra $150 to $200 a month he didn't plan for. Then there's what I think of as the shrinking life tax. When you own a car, driving somewhere extra costs you almost nothing. The car is already paid for. But when every trip is a transaction, you start making different choices. Marco skips the gym because it's a $20 round trip. He orders delivery instead of picking up food and pays $8 in fees plus a tip. He says no to a friend's cookout 40 minutes away because the Uber would be $60 each way. He's not saving money at that point. He's just going fewer places. And the things he replaces those trips with, delivery fees, shipped groceries, opportunities he quietly passes on, add up to maybe $80 to $100 a month. The rental car problem. A few times a year, Marco needs a car for a full day. A road trip, helping someone move, a family thing out in the suburbs. He rents. Average daily rental with insurance runs about $85. 3 or 4 times a year. That's $300-ish. Not huge, but it's another line that never appears in anyone's Uber versus car spreadsheet. And the one that's invisible until you actually think about it. Time. Lisa's 14-mile commute takes about 22 minutes. Marco's Uber takes 22 minutes plus an average 5 to 8 minute wait. Call it 7 extra minutes a day. Doesn't sound like much. 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year. That's about 29 hours standing on a curb watching a little car icon crawl across his phone screen. You can't bill that, but you feel it. When you add surge pricing, substitution costs, rentals, and the time factor on top of Marco's base number, his adjusted cost goes even higher. The gap at 12,000 miles stretches further, and the crossover point doesn't really move because these hidden costs scale with usage. More rides, more surge, more waiting. Less rides, less of all of it. The crossover stays around 8 to 9,000 miles. Let's lay out the real scoreboard at every mileage level, because this whole question comes down to a single number. At 5,000 miles a year, that's someone who works from home and barely goes anywhere. Marco's total Uber spend comes to about $8,600. Lisa's car still costs about $13,900. Uber wins by $5,300. It's not close. If you drive 5,000 miles a year and own a car, you are genuinely wasting money. At 8,000 miles, the gap narrows. Marco's at about $12,800. Lisa's at roughly $14,600. Uber still wins, but by less than $2,000. Right around 8,500 miles, the lines cross. That's the number. Remember it. At 12,000 miles, roughly the national average per driver, Lisa spends $15,500. Marco spends over $20,000. The car wins by almost $5,000. At 15,000 miles, the car wins by nearly $8,000. At 20,000 miles, and this is what you hit if you have a long commute, or kids, or a life that extends past a 5-mile radius, the car wins by over $12,000 a year, because Lisa's extra cost per mile is maybe 12 cents. Marco's is about $1.40. Every mile above the crossover widens that gap, and it widens fast. That's not a gradual slope. That's a cliff. Here's the part that keeps sticking with me. The average American drives about 14,000 miles per year. For the average American, owning a car is significantly cheaper than relying on Uber. But a meaningful chunk of the population, especially remote workers, retirees, and people in walkable cities, drives well under 10,000. For them, car ownership is the more expensive choice, and most of them have never run these numbers. I'd be lying if I said car ownership has no downsides at any mileage. Even when the math says own, there are costs no spreadsheet can capture. The mental load. Lisa doesn't just pay for her car, she manages it. She tracks oil changes. She schedules tire rotations. She deals with the check engine light that comes on the 1 week she can't deal with it. She spends a Saturday morning at the dealership because something rattles when she turns left. She compares insurance quotes every renewal period. She argues with a mechanic about whether she really needs new brake pads or whether he's padding the bill. None of this is in a spreadsheet. All of it is in her life. The sunk cost trap. Lisa has a car, so Lisa drives, even when it doesn't make sense. 4 blocks to the coffee shop. Places she could walk. The car sits idling for 20 minutes while she waits for a friend. Because the car is already paid for, she never questions whether an individual trip is worth it. Marco questions every single trip because every trip shows up on a receipt. That friction is annoying, but it also makes him more deliberate about when and where he goes. Lisa spends more casually. She just doesn't feel it the same way. The depreciation front-loading. We calculated Lisa's depreciation as a monthly average, but depreciation doesn't work that way. The biggest hit happens in years 1 and 2. Lisa's Camry probably lost $3,000 to $4,000 in value the moment she drove it off the lot. If she sells at year 2 instead of year 5, her per-mile cost jumps dramatically, and the crossover point moves from $8,500 to maybe $12,000. The car math only works if she keeps it long enough for the depreciation curve to flatten. And flexibility. This is the one nobody wants to quantify because you can't. Marco can move to a new city next month. He can take a job in a different state. He can relocate to a neighborhood where he barely needs transportation at all. Lisa has a loan. She has insurance locked in. She has a car that, for the first couple of years, is worth less than what she owes. That car isn't just a way to get around, it's a commitment. And commitments have costs that no calculator can put a dollar sign on. For a 25-year-old who changes jobs every 2 years and lives in a city with decent transit, Uber might make sense even slightly above the crossover. For a 35-year-old with a family, a house, and a stable 10-year commute, the car wins and it's not particularly close. Numbers tell you what's cheaper. They don't tell you what's smarter for your life. That part depends on something no spreadsheet has a column for. Here's where everything comes together. Every dollar tracked, every hidden cost included. Both numbers on the table. After 12 months, here's where Lisa and Marco actually ended up. Lisa, car owner, 12,000 miles, spent $15,552. Not the $587 per month she thought. Every insurance payment, every dollar of depreciation she never saw, every tank of gas, every parking spot, $15,552. Marco, Uber only, 12,000 miles, spent over $20,000. That includes surge pricing, substitution costs, and a few car rentals. 20 grand plus. The car won at 12,000 miles, by almost $5,000. But here's the number that actually matters. The crossover point. The exact mileage where owning a car becomes cheaper than Uber. That number is roughly 8,500 miles per year. Below 8,500, every mile you don't drive is money saved by not owning a car. Above 8,500, every mile you do drive is money saved by having one. And the gap grows quickly in both directions. At 5,000 miles, Uber saves you over $5,000 a year. At 14,000 miles, a car saves you nearly 8,000. Same two people, same city, same income. The only thing that changed is how far they moved. That's the real math, not cars are always better or Uber saves everyone money. The answer is a number, and that number is 8,500. 3 questions. Answer them honestly, and the decision basically makes itself. How many miles do you actually drive per year? Not how many you think. Check your odometer. Check your Uber history. Get the real number. If it's below 7,000, you probably don't need a car. If it's above 10,000, owning one almost certainly saves you money. If you're somewhere in between, go to question 2. How long will you keep the car? If you buy new and sell in 2 years, depreciation eats the math alive. The car math only works if you hold it 5 years minimum. 7 is better. If you're not willing to commit to a car for that long, Uber might still come out ahead even at higher mileage. What's your flexibility worth? If your life is stable, steady job, stable home, predictable commute, the car wins above 8,500 miles, period. But if things are likely to change in the next couple of years, new city, new job, new situation, the savings from owning can evaporate the moment you're stuck with a depreciating asset you no longer need. 3 questions, 1 number. That's the whole thing. Everything else is noise. Lisa and Marco started with the same paycheck, the same commute, and the same goal. Spend as little as possible getting from A to B. The difference wasn't which option they chose. It was whether they knew their number before they chose it. So the next time someone tells you owning a car is always the smart move, or that Uber saves everyone money, ask them one question. How many miles? Because below 8,500, you're paying for a machine that sits in a parking lot losing value 16 hours a day. And above 8,500, you're paying $1.40 per mile for something that could cost you 12 cents. The answer was never car or Uber. The answer was always the mileage. If this gave you a framework you'll actually use, subscribe. I break down one financial decision like this every week. And the next one might save you more than this one did.